Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are uncorking one heck of a story. It's all about how a single drink from ancient Greece did way more than just quench thirst. I mean, we're talking about a beverage that literally built economies, fueled philosophy, and created a legacy that, is probably swirling in your glass right now. So let's get into it. So, to really get why wine was so important, you've got to start with how the Greeks themselves thought about it. And honestly, the poet Pindar just nails it here. For them, this wasn't just, a drink. It was a divine tool, something for inspiration, for peace of mind. It was truly a gift.
Okay, first up, a gift from the gods. Our story, it doesn't start in a vineyard. Nope, it starts in the world of myth. See, the Greeks were convinced that wine wasn't something humans figured out. They believed it was a direct gift from the heavens, brought down to earth by one very specific, and let's be honest, very popular god. And at the absolute center of it all, you've got Dionysus. The story goes that he, a son of Zeus, no less, is the one who stumbled upon the grapevine. He figured out that kind of magical process of fermentation and then shared this incredible discovery with all of humanity. But here's the thing, he wasn't just the god of wine. He was the god of everything that came with wine. The joy, the freedom, and even a little bit of that divine madness.
So you can see why for the ancient Greeks, drinking wine was, it was a sacred act, a really big deal. It was their way of connecting the mortal world with the world of the gods. I mean, during sacrifices, they'd pour it out as an offering. At these massive festivals, like the Dionysiacs, wine was the fuel for the entire celebration, for the theater, for the music, for reaching this feeling of transcendence. It literally, and I mean literally, lifted their spirits. All right, section 2, taming the grape. So let's move from the myths down to the actual dirt. Because the Greeks didn't just pray to the god of wine, they got their hands dirty and became absolute masters at growing the stuff. They turned this divine gift into a real science. And they were total pioneers. I mean, these guys were amazing sailors and traders, and everywhere they went, the grapevine went with them. From the rocky hills on the mainland to the volcanic soil on islands like Santorini, and all across their colonies in what we now call Italy, France, and Spain. It's like they were missionaries, but for the grapevine, planting it basically wherever their ships made landfall. And get this, they weren't just chucking seeds in the ground and hoping for the best. Their methods were seriously advanced for the time. They were super strategic about where they planted, thinking about sun, about soil. They were experts at pruning the vines to get better quality grapes, not just more of them. And here's the really amazing part. They had this intuitive grasp of what we now call terroir. That core idea that a very specific place, its climate, its soil, is what gives a wine its unique soul. And all that know-how, it meant they could cultivate a whole range of different native grapes. And many of these are still rock stars in the wine world today. For reds, you had the full-bodied Agirgiaco. For whites, the zippy, high-acidity, mineral-packed Acertico from Santorino, which you can still find, and it is fantastic. So we're not just talking red or white here. This was already a really sophisticated lineup of very distinct flavors. Okay, part 3, the art of ancient winemaking. So you've got the perfect grapes, now what? How did they actually turn them into this nectar for mortals? Well, the whole process was this beautiful mix of really simple tools and some surprisingly sophisticated thinking. So first came the pressing. And this was usually done the old-fashioned way by foot in these big stone vats. Then all that juice, the must, got poured into these huge terracotta jars called pithoi. Now here's the clever part. To control the temperature while it fermented, they would often bury these jars right in the ground. I mean, talk about a brilliant low-tech solution for temperature control. And finally, once the wine was ready, it was aged and shipped out in those classic clay vessels we all recognize, the amphora. But the wine back then wasn't exactly what we might think of today. It wasn't always so, pure. To keep it from going bad on those long sea voyages, and also to add some interesting flavors, the Greeks used all sorts of surprising additives. Pine resin was a big one. That's where we get the famous Retsina wine from, and it also helped kill off microbes. They'd also throw in herbs, spices, honey, and get this, in some places near the coast, they'd even add a little bit of seawater. It helped with preservation and gave it a kind of salty kick.
All right, moving on to section 4, the soul of society. And this is where things get really interesting, because wine's biggest impact wasn't in the vineyard or the cellar. It was on society itself. I mean, it was literally woven into the fabric of everyday Greek life, shaping everything from philosophy to the economy to your social status. So that begs the question, right? How did the Greeks actually drink their wine? Because the how was a huge deal. In fact, for them, it was one of the main things that separated a civilized Greek from, well, an uncivilized barbarian. And this really was the dividing line. In their view, so-called barbarians just drank wine straight up, undiluted. And to a Greek, that was just a one-way ticket to getting sloppy drunk and losing all control. A proper civilized Greek, on the other hand, always mixed their wine with water, usually about 1 part wine to 3 parts water. See, the goal wasn't to get wasted. The goal was moderation, good conversation, and, stimulating the mind.
And the place where this custom was absolutely perfected was the symposium. Now, we tend to think of a symposium as just a big drinking party, right? But it was so much more than that. It was the intellectual and social hub for elite Greek men. This is where they'd gather, drink their carefully mixed wine, listen to poetry, and debate all the big questions about philosophy, politics, and art. You could say wine was the lubricant for genius.
And outside of these elite parties, wine was just a massive economic engine. It was basically liquid gold. The export of wine, all packed up in those sealed amphora, fueled trade routes across the entire Mediterranean. It connected Greece with Egypt, with Italy, with places far and wide. And all that trade, it generated an absolute ton of wealth that paid for things like temples and huge public projects.
And yeah, what you drank and what you drank it out of was a dead giveaway of your social status. No question. The rich elite, they were sipping aged, fancy, imported wines out of gorgeous gold and silver cups. The average citizen was drinking simple, local stuff from a plain old clay cup. And slaves, they got the leftovers, low-quality, super-diluted wine rations served in the most basic pottery you can imagine. It was, quite literally, a liquid hierarchy. And that brings us to our last section, an enduring legacy. This is the really crucial part, because we're going to connect all of this ancient history directly to the glass of wine you might be holding right now. Because trust me, the Greek influence did not just fade away with their empire. So who picked up the torch? Well, it was the Romans. They were huge admirers of Greek culture, so they basically soaked up everything the Greeks knew about wine. They took their farming techniques, their grape varieties, their whole philosophy around wine. And then, as the Roman Empire bulldozed its way across Europe, they planted vineyards everywhere, spreading that Greek know-how all over the continent. And this created this incredible unbroken chain of influence that stretches right down to today. That Greek idea of terroir we talked about, that is the direct ancestor of modern wine laws in Europe, like the AOC system in France or the DOC in Italy. They're all based on that same idea, that a wine's identity comes from a specific place. And it gets even cooler. Today, some of the most trendy, cutting-edge natural winemakers are going back to ancient Greek techniques, like using those clay amphorae for fermentation. The past is totally the future of wine. So here's the big takeaway. What if the entire history of Western civilization could be told through just one glass of wine? The next time you pour a glass, just take a second and think about what's really in there. You're not just holding a drink. You're holding a piece of liquid history. It's a direct connection to the philosophers, the gods, the farmers, and the sailors of the ancient world. Every single sip has a little taste of that history. Cheers to that.